Productions.
Welcome to the inaugural episode of Horror Movies Hub Presents. I'm Carter Lee, and joining me is the Intern of Evil, Christian Conley. Hello, Christian. How are you?
Good, Carter. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited to cover Poltergeist today.
Me too. I've seen like 2 horror movies, and I'm glad that I could finally jump into the horror genre.
I'm very excited for you, and for those listening, Christian is new to the horror genre. He is our Final Girl Productions Intern of Evil, so anytime Christian is co-hosting the show with me, at least for a while now, we will be covering horror movies he hasn't seen, which gives longtime horror fans like myself and so many of our listeners a chance to kind of relive the magic of horror and these classic horror tales and modern ones too. But I wanted to start with Poltergeist because it's just a classic ghost story from the 80s.
Of course.
All right. So let's get into it here. Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Very good. So this film was released on June 4th by MGM in 1982, and that summer would become known as the summer of Steven Spielberg, the summer of Spielberg, because he had this blockbuster as well as E.T. arrive just days apart.
Probably made some good money.
Yeah, I think he has probably made some good money. And even now, anything he touches. So this is from the brainchild of Steven Spielberg, and he originally wanted Stephen King to co-write the screenplay with him. That didn't work out because there was a communication breakdown. So this is the 80s, before the internet, and at the time, Stephen King was sailing on a ship across the Atlantic to England. So there was literally a communication breakdown, and that's really the only thing that prevented King from co-writing this.
Wow, that's insane to think about. Like having those 2 star names was just completely shattered apart by just moving to Britain.
Yeah, right. Yeah, visiting it. Great job, King. That was before his sober days, so I'm sure he would have created a lot of good stuff. But we still got a masterpiece.
Absolutely. Could have had the double Stevens, though. That's incredible to think about.
Right? Just amazing. So Stephen King, this is one of the few films where he's tributed as a writer. He co-wrote it with Michael Grace and Mark Victor. And Michael and Mark would go on to co-write several more films together, including the sequel, Poltergeist 2, as well as Marked for Death and Cool World.
Me being a little bit of a noob, I don't really know those movies, but I'm excited to get into them later.
So like a noob to movies? Because those aren't horror movies, although one might say Steven Seagal's acting in Marked for Death was quite horrific.
Well, that tells you just how much I know about regular movies as well.
Well, we'll have a separate podcast. I'm going to introduce Christian to media. That's what this is going to be. Wait till he hears about sitcoms, folks. He's going to lose his shit.
Like Wheel of Fortune.
Okay, so at this, MGM was doing Poltergeist at the same time that Universal was doing E.T. And part of Universal's contract with Steven Spielberg was he was not allowed to direct another film while directing E.T. So, being a huge fan of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Spielberg got a hold of Tobe Hooper to direct the film. And Tobe Hooper, legendary Texas Chainsaw Massacre director, and there's some controversy in this film. Actually, there's lots of controversy, but it is long debated if Spielberg should be, he's not allowed to for legal reasons because of his contract with Universal, but many people said he was really the co-director. Spielberg denies this, as well as Hooper. He said, this is Hooper's film. I'm just a hands-on producer. And fun fact, this, or should I say fear fact, this was Steven Spielberg's first credit as a producer.
Wow. Well, it's such a big name as a director. It's hard
Yeah.
to imagine him doing anything else.
Well, I think that's what also annoyed Hooper is normally when a movie is promoted as a director's name, like Steven Spielberg's Jaws. And in this case, it was Steven Spielberg's Poltergeist, even though it was a film by Tobe Hooper. So I, along with other longtime horror buffs, get annoyed with that. This is a Tobe Hooper film, but I'm a big Spielberg fan. So to me, I love this movie. I don't care who directed it or who produced it. It's awesome. So one of Spielberg's previous hits was Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and this movie was originally going to be a horror sequel to that titled Night Skies. Hooper had little interest in the science fiction and alien idea of it, and he said, how about we just collaborate on a ghost story? So there you go. The film's budget was $10.7 million, and at the time, it garnered a U.S. box office return of $76.6 million and a worldwide box office return of $121.7 million, which is the equivalent of $215 million in today's money.
Well, it goes to show that Spielberg was in fact making money.
He was, yes, because that mystery solved. This movie, of course, garnered tons of awards, and it was nominated for 3 Oscars for Best Original Score, Best Sound Effects Editing, and Best Visual Effects, and they lost all of those to E.T. So, maybe not fun if you're Hooper, but if you're Spielberg, you're loving it.
Absolutely.
Yes. So, what better way for your movie to lose to the Oscars to your other movie by winning in the Oscars. So this indeed was the summer of Spielberg.
I can imagine that. Tobe Hooper going, oh, we lost. And Steven Spielberg just going, did we though?
Yeah. He's like, did we? Did I? Did I lose? So someone who probably should be credited for this, at least according to him, is Richard Matheson. Richard Matheson wrote a story in The Twilight Zone titled Little Girl Lost, about a little girl who goes into another dimension through a portal in her bedroom wall. But Matheson never received credit for this.
Wow.
So that's kind of bogus. But aside from that, Spielberg took the idea of this community that we see the Freelings live in. It takes place in California, but Spielberg based it on his own hometown. And basically this really ends up encompassing anywhere USA where middle class people live, or upper middle class.
Sure looked like it. Like you first thing in the movie, you just see just a neighborhood kind of in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by houses. You're like, yeah, this could be anywhere in America.
Yes, anywhere where privileged people get to live.
Wow.
Well, seemingly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
seemingly.
Yes. So that's all exciting stuff. Now let's just get into the movie a little bit, shall we?
Absolutely. I'm excited.
Tell me how a newcomer like you felt during some of the more key scenes. And what I like about this is they start the movie up and, well, we're introduced to the Freelings.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 80s, it was pretty typical to fall asleep to television and wake up to either white noise or like the emergency broadcast system testing their beeping noises that would wake you up. Mm-hmm. But it would always go off the air. It's before 24-hour television, and it would always go off the air with the national anthem, and that's how the movie begins.
I was wondering about that.
Yes, sign off of the national anthem, and then we get the white noise, and we see young Carol Ann, about 5 years old, come down the stairs, say something into the television set. We can't hear what she's hearing, but we see her responses. And that's kind of the start of the movie. What'd you think of that opening scene?
Well, like I said, it was interesting to me about the whole national anthem thing, because as somebody who's as young as me, I didn't really notice, or I noticed that I actually put down in my notes, the national anthem reoccurring. I was thinking maybe that was meaning something, but no, it's just that was the age of the thing.
Just a sign of the times.
I have the feeling just like, okay, you start off with the TV. The only thing you can think of is that it's going to end with the TV. Obviously, there's something paranormal going on, and it's cool to see that they immediately jump in, show the focus, and get it started right away, introducing the family and showing who's going to be the target.
Exactly. And we know right away that this little girl has a connection to them, or they have a connection, or whatever, to the little girl.
Mm-hmm.
So another little fear fact here. Drew Barrymore initially auditioned for this.
Drew Barrymore.
Oh, yes. You are familiar with her, correct?
As a media.
Jesus Christ on a crutch, Christian. I've known you long enough to know you're around television. Do you have Netflix? Are you kids in tune with Netflix these days?
Some of us.
A little show on there about she's a zombie. All right, doesn't matter. Anyways, Drew Barrymore was a little girl in E.T. Have you seen E.T.? What in the God's name is happening? How'd you get this internship? Okay, so
that's the whole point. You're to teach me, right?
Everything,
every cinematic
movie ever made. So let's start over with the first colorized movie, The Wizard of Oz. Okay,
that was scary.
Drew Barrymore is famous for many things, but as a little girl, she was famous for being the little girl in E.T. She auditioned for this first, and apparently, Spielberg did the audition, and she lied through her teeth to Spielberg and said she was a drummer of a famous rock band. Keep in mind, she's like 7 with all this creativity. And he was looking for an actress that really portrayed innocence, and he didn't see that in her. So he said, this role is not right for you. However, I have another role you should audition for, and that was what eventually landed her in E.T.
Spielberg knows how to use his tools pretty well, huh?
Yeah, he's been around the block or two. Yeah, wait till Christian learns about Jurassic Park. He'll freak out.
I know of it.
I know you've seen Jurassic Park.
I've seen Jurassic World.
You've seen Jurassic Park, sir. I know you have. For fact.
Ages ago.
Yes. Around the same time, you were introduced to the Doors.
See, music's a little bit different for me. That's why I'm getting into the movies, because music, I know.
Yes, that's exciting. So we are introduced in the beginning of the movie to the Freelings. The Freelings is Steve Freeling, the father, who's played by Craig T. Nelson, Coach's Own, for anyone out there older than 30. Diane Freeling, who is played by Jo Beth Williams. And, of course, we have Heather O'Rourke, the late Heather O'Rourke, tragically, as Carol Ann Freeling. And Diane Freeling is the 15-year-old oldest sibling, who's played by Dominic Dunn. And the middle child, I believe he's 8 in the movie, is played by Oliver Robbins, who portrays Robbie Freeling. So that's the Freelings.
Mm-hmm. 5 of them. I figured that's a good... I feel like it was supposed to portray like a typical American family.
It is, and this is so Spielberg has a theme here. In Close Encounters of the Third Kind, it was a similar town with a similar family, and he loves turning just normal, everyday, average, or maybe upper middle class families on their head with something. In Close Encounters, it was with aliens. In Poltergeist, it's, of course, with poltergeists. And in some ways, he did the same in E.T. It's like he loves just taking regular lives and going, hey, look at this. And
we're going to mess with
your life now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty cool. And actually, I found something neat. Now might be the time to introduce it. So when a movie is released, and many people already know this, but for those that don't, a press kit is sent out to much of the media. Whether it's film journalists or television media, they get a press kit on how, basically hyping up the movie. And if you want to report on it, here's some information. So I'm going to read just a little bit of this original press kit from 1982. Steven Spielberg takes terror to the suburbs in MGM's Poltergeist. As director of such box office blockbusters as Jaws, which, by the way, was the first ever summer blockbuster, and Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Raiders of the Lost Ark, Steven Spielberg has demonstrated a remarkable talent for placing ordinary people in extraordinary situations. And we have a quote here in this by Stephen King, and he said, "I really based this California neighborhood on suburban Scottsdale, Arizona, where I grew up. It is the lifestyle of suburban America: two-car garages, tract homes, and cul-de-sacs. The U-totem down the street and the elementary school within walking distance. The Freeling family in Poltergeist is not atypical of the people I knew and grew up with in Scottsdale." So there you go. And then Toby Hooper has a quote here, and he said that fascination and thrills in a safe experience is what Toby Hooper, director of MGM's supernatural thriller Poltergeist, believes motion picture audiences look for at the movies. Quote, "There is a curiosity in the unusual and a chance of experiencing something vicariously that might not be or that we may not ordinarily get to do. The movies, and our movie is a great example. It gives people a chance to experience something quite fantastic in a very safe way."
Wow.
Yes.
That's a good little blurb.
Yeah, it's just cool, like coming across these old classic press releases, and it goes on and tells about the cast. But we'll be doing that in here.
I have to compliment you. You do make it sound way better with your nice little thriller voice.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's why I get paid the big bucks. Right. Which brings us to Patreon. No, we don't have that set up yet.
Oh.
Okay. So let's just go through some of the creepy scenes, shall we? Okay. So I do like this because the way this is kind of a crescendo of horror in Poltergeist. When we first start seeing supernatural crap happen, it's not necessarily in a threatening way, right?
No.
Like we see the girl talk to the screen, the creepy clown kind of briefly comes to life, maybe, but is that just the kid's imagination?
Shadow.
Yes, exactly. And then, at one point, the children are sleeping in their parents' room and they all fall asleep, and we get the anthem again and the sign off, and Carol Ann gets up from the bed. And then we finally really see that something's going on, because this time when she talks into the television filled with white noise, we hear some whispering back. And some green, viney, supernatural stuff happens. It leaps out of the television, just shoots above the wall, above her parents' head. Mm-hmm. So what do you think of the visual effects here?
You can't help but notice, especially in today's age, that it is very dated. But I also was not disappointed. As going back to an 80s movie, you expect some special effects to not hold up today. But I was actually pleasantly surprised seeing how well it was created. I thought it represented what it was supposed to represent very well, seeing as dangerous, mysterious, and also just overall you could see the spiritualness, like the ghostiness.
Yes, exactly. And I agree. It is obviously the effects are a bit dated. But if you go back to other movies in this epoch, it shows you what big budget special effects can get you versus a lot of other movies from this time. Because, you watch some of those movies and it takes you out of it and it's hard to get into it or to fully buy in. So you're saying despite, if I heard you correctly, despite some of the dating of it, you still bought in.
Oh, absolutely. It felt
awesome.
Like, of course, like later in the movie, some of it's like it gets a little bit too serious for what it's representing. But at the same time, like, you still really feel the impact of just the visuals.
Yes. And they use a lot of practical effects in this, which is just, actual
real,
right. Special effects made by models or whatever. And obviously they have to use some that's generated through computers, which I have created the moniker for, and I hope it catches on as CGI. So
very creative name. Hope it sticks.
Thank you. It stands for Carter's Genius. I don't know.
Invention.
Oh, thank you. Yes. The eyes always stump me. So the poop really starts hitting the fan at about 24 minutes. Okay, I also like this movie because I never feel like they waste my time.
No.
It's a 2-hour movie. Yes, yeah, it's not too much buildup, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's that, it's a thrill ride really from beginning to end. But out of the 2-hour movie, at about 24 minutes into the film, is when she talks to the TV and the green vines go out, and then she says the famous sentence that has been ingrained in pop culture ever since. It was certainly um, I was born in 77. I grew up in the 80s, and I quoted this movie before I even saw it.
Even
And
I know
that's
it.
when, the parents wake up, they look at, all the stuff hit the wall, it wakes them up. They think it's an earthquake. They look at Carol Ann, and what does she say?
They're here.
It's still creepy and cute and funny all at once to this day. So you flash forward to a couple scenes and we get the next supernatural happening, which is the chair scene. And as simple as this is, it is one of my favorite scenes from the entire movie because, again, they don't start off with these beings or spirits or poltergeists or whatever, as we're discovering in this movie. They don't necessarily start off with nefarious intent.
Oh,
so Diane, the mother / wife, is in the kitchen with Carol Ann, and Carol Ann has described the people she talks to as the TV people. And the chairs are pulled out, and the mother's a little annoyed, and she said, I told you all not to pull out the chairs. She scoots them back in neatly, and the camera follows her into the kitchen, and when she gasps, because when she looks back, all of the chairs are stacked up on top of the table.
It looked cool.
It did.
I compliment the ghost.
Yeah, yes, they're very organized.
Absolutely.
Well, so far they're not making a mess, but give it time. The cool thing about this scene is that was actually filmed in one shot, and I'm assuming because he just wanted to follow her reaction and she didn't have to cut to then get back into the scene. So when they cut away and you only see her and she's bending over to go into the pantry or the cabinet or whatever, the set crew actually come in to remove the chairs while they're still rolling. Pardon me. While they're still rolling, and then they fasten all the chairs to, they put all the chairs that are fastened together on top of the table. So that's one cut, one smooth cut.
So those chairs, they weren't stacked together. They were all just basically one chair, like sculpture.
So they quickly.
I was about to compliment
the chairs. And,
it's like that would have been incredible if it wasn't just one little piece.
Yes.
Had to do all that in that short amount of time.
And I'm going to go ahead and, since it is a film by Tobe Hooper, let's give props to him on that. I'm going to assume that was his direction to take the one shot. So I might have said Spielberg earlier on that, but that was probably Hooper. Who knows? Doesn't matter. One shot. Brilliant.
Look, they lost.
Dude, we can do a whole episode, not that I would want to, but just on the controversy of was it Hooper's, was it Spielberg's, and countless interviews. It's insane. Like that's why I kind of glazed over that whole thing. But according to Hooper and according to, easy for me to say, Spielberg, it was very much Hooper's film, and Spielberg was just a hands-on producer.
I feel like we should just, if they both say it's Hooper, we'll just leave it at Hooper for now.
That's what I'm saying. And I love me some Tobe Hooper, of course, so we're going to go with that. So this is a cool scene because what I like about this is Diane does not seem frightened. She seems like curious. She even like laughs a little bit, like what is happening? And when the father returns, Steven, and maybe not a coincidence, Steven Spielberg, Steven Freeling, but Steven, when he arrives home, Diane has a circle marked off in the kitchen and says, look at this, and says, remember when you used to be young and cool with an open mind before you became a stuck-up realtor? Well, I need that young person I fell in love with and not this stick in the mud. So watch this. And she puts a chair right in the center of the circle, and the chair just slides across and hits the other side of the kitchen into the wall. And he's stunned by this. I don't know if you remember this, Christian, but right when she's describing it, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. She then puts, because she's a great mom, she decides that this would be fun for her daughter, her 5-year-old daughter to do.
I was about to say.
So she puts a football helmet on this kid who's just wanting pizza. She's like, I want pizza. I don't care about this supernatural slide you got going on. She puts Carol Ann in the circle, and Carol Ann slides and hits the wall. And the father looks shocked. And Diane's like, why don't you try it? It tickles a little. Then all of a sudden, there's a weird cutaway to the next scene. Like TV movie amateur rough cut.
I actually did notice that. I was like, that's kind of, it didn't feel natural. Definitely.
No, it didn't. But this is how 99% of audiences have seen it since day one. Some audiences in 82 claimed they saw the full scene, but pretty much MGM said no one has. So what happened was they were talking about pizza. And then Steve is very hungry, and as Diane is trying to explain what's happening and how they feel, someone, I think Carol Ann, says Pizza Hut, and Steve says Pizza Hut sucks. So before the release, Pizza Hut got wind of this and was wow. WTF? Why the face? And and that's a little quote from Philip Humphrey Dumfrey, and says, why are you bashing us? Whatever. I'm sure there's some business ties there too. So at this point in the stage of production, it was too late to reshoot. I mean, they were about to release this, so they just cut it out.
Snip, snip.
Snip, snip. Now, what we missed as the audience was more than that one-liner of Pizza Hut sucks. What we missed was an exchange back and forth. I'm not going to quote it verbatim, but basically it's the husband going, I'm hungry, Pizza Hut sucks, but really what the hell's going on here? She's like, I don't know. It kind of tickles, whatever. Meanwhile, Carol Ann, and we don't get to see this, goes back on the circle and this time slides very quickly and roughly into the wall to the point that her head, which still is donning, I believe, the football helmet, smashes into the wall and with a giant hole.
Wow. So
it actually did kind of compromise the intensity of that scene. Of course, you don't know what you don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, doesn't really take you out of the movie, but it is a weird rough cut.
I just want to get this straight real quick.
Yes.
What kind of mother puts her kid in a chair with obviously something that's not natural, slides to slap a football helmet and says, oh, you'll be fine. Here, you'll get pizza after this. What right mind says that you should do the kid to this? I paused this scene for a long time and thinking, my mother would be leaving by now. She wouldn't care. They'd be gone. They'd be like, my husband's a realtor. They'll find me another house. I'm not messing with this.
If this happened to me, this would be a very short movie.
Exactly.
I'd be like, oh, cool. So on the way to the hotel, drive through anyone? I'm hungry. And that would just be it. The credits would roll.
Staying away from TVs, get a new house.
So a trope in horror movies, and in this one, I think it's to show you like how they don't feel threatened by this presence. But just in general, to talk about horror, you will often see the worst parents in horror movies and guardians in general and people of authority. Like usually parents don't believe their children who are being stalked by something or someone. Police don't believe them. Teachers don't believe them. It's on the kids or the teenagers. And it's pretty cool as far as putting the young adults or young actors at the forefront of the story. And in this case, the whole family's kind of at the forefront, minus the teenage daughter that we only see a little bit of. But, having shitty parents in a horror movie, pretty typical.
I actually thought the father was somewhat sane. He cared. He was trying to be real about it. He was obviously the most upset and trying to be the most rational.
He's the only one that seems scared before it gets scary.
Exactly.
Like he sees this and he's like you all realize this is not normal, right? Like there's aren't places and homes that are just like supernatural slides and stuff. This isn't okay, but I am hungry, so how about that pizza? Okay, so a few scenes later, we get the real first sign, and boy, is it a big one, that these are not friendly poltergeists. So we saw this tree, I believe, in a scene before, but there's a tree outside young Robbie's room. Yeah. He's on the second floor. It's a big tree. Incidentally, this whole tree coming to life scene is what inspired the raping tree in The Evil Dead 2.
That's a tree.
Yes, that's a tree. So this was the first, I believe, in a horror film tree come to life thing. So a storm's occurring. The tree at first seemingly crashes through Robbie's window, but then the long branches like arms grab a hold of him, pull him out of the window close to the upper trunk of the tree, the chest, if you will. The parents are freaking out. They run outside, and he's screaming, saying, "It's taking me in, it's taking me in." Meanwhile, Carol Ann is being... Hello, HMH hounds. We hope you are enjoying the show. I just wanted to take less than a minute or so to tell you about the official Horror Movies Hub shop, shophmh.com. We have original horror and Halloween shirts on sale right now, and we ship fast. All HMH Shop t-shirts are made of luxurious 100% cotton that's ring spun for that extra smooth and soft feel your body craves. However, there is no smothering here. These incredibly soft yet durable shirts are semi-fitted, which allows a sumptuous cotton to make gentle love to your torso while respecting your boundaries and giving you space to breathe. A semi-fitted shirt is one that is not too boxy nor too tight, leaving a great fit for all body types. Seriously, hounds, I'm 6'4" and I'm pretty fudgy, but these shirts make me look great and far less fudgy than I actually am. If they look great on me, they will look great on you. All shophmh.com shirts are in-house designed, made in and shipped from the USA by Final Girl Productions, and all our horror and Halloween shirts are on sale right now. And more than just horror, we offer other selections of shirts, including customizable breast cancer shirts, also on sale, smart wrestling fan shirts, and more. Visit shophmh.com today. That's shophmh.com today, because we make bloody good shirts. And now, back to the show. Tucked into the closet. Now, in real life, this is the only time during filming, reportedly, that Carol Ann, the actress who portrayed her, was actually afraid because she was being pulled so hard, and there was a giant, like the whole reason things were blowing around her room is because that really was happening with this giant fan.
Wow.
And she was screaming, and then Hooper got the cut he needed, went and consoled her and said, "Don't worry, you don't have to film that scene again. That's good, and that'll be the worst that you have to deal with." Oh, so that actually scared the bejesus out of her.
It's like the cannibal Holocaust thing where they had to prove it in court. Just like, are you sure she wasn't terrified thing?
Yeah, right. Yes. Exactly like the Holocaust.
No, the cannibal Holocaust movie. That's the one thing I know about that movie is that people were like, it's just real kind of stuff. But good acting. Like I wanted to say, it's just like Heather O'Rourke played Carol Ann so well.
Oh, the casting.
She played her little girl, innocent role so well. And I want to also interject with, there you go, another example of the dad being good, because he didn't wait. He went his ass up there and he wanted to go save his son.
Yeah,
instantly.
So he's outside, and they're all outside except for Carol Ann, who's being sucked into a portal while the kid's being eaten by a tree. So they rescue the kid from the tree, which is then swooped away by a tornado. And that whole area it's now just where the swimming pool was. It's this hollowed ground. And they're like, "Oh, look, a tornado." Because that's normal right now. So so they then realize that Carol Ann is missing. Where's Carol Ann? And Robbie can hear Carol Ann's voice coming from the television. And this is cool because Diane hears a voice, but is still looking around the house. So, "Where are you, honey? Where are you, honey?" And then we have that cool moment where she's staring at the television filled with white noise, and she hears Carol Ann.
Wow.
So this isn't normal. What do? They get some parapsychologist academia nerds led by Dr. Lesh, and they arrive at the Freeling's house after an interview, and they're like, "Oh, one time I recorded this object that took 12 hours or whatever to move 7 feet." And then the parents, now at this point, the father is a good father because it looks like he hasn't slept ever.
No.
And he looks like he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. And somehow, this might be my only criticism of the movie, unless this is what they were trying to convey, Diane at times still seems excited about all this shit.
What the hell is wrong with her? She's a terrible mother.
I mean, I know they're like in their young 30s and she hasn't even reached her prime. And she's like, this is fun. I think the fun stops once your kid is inside the television. So great. So anyways, they tell the story about like, hey, things do move and I have this time lapse camera. And then they just kind of smirk. And he's like, we don't go into Carol Ann's room ever, but there it is. They open the door and it's just chaos. All the toys are swirling around a circle. The Incredible Hulk floats by riding a horse. The creepy clown is riding the bed like some sort of rodeo or adult film. Probably more rodeo.
Hopefully.
And it's also the part of the movie where we learn the difference between poltergeist intrusion and full-on haunting. So after this, the main doctor there, Dr. Lesh, her hand's shaking as she's trying to drink tea with the family at the table. And she says, well, if this is a poltergeist intrusion, that's associated with an individual, and they just might hang out and leave at any moment. But if it's a full-on hunting, that has to do more with locations and especially houses.
Which is, this is a
good.
Second reason. You got to get out the house.
Yeah, always. And so the first step, if this ever happens to you folks, is you leave the location. If it turns out that it's following the individual, like let's say a child, you're in the hotel room 60 miles away and you're like, oh, it wasn't a haunting. This poltergeist is following the child. That's when you kill the child.
Sorry, but that's the best option.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you always make 3 children.
Exactly.
Get a couple
so
spares. Parenting 101. I could have been the mother in this movie.
Us being 2 parents, absolutely not. We understand the sacrifices that need to be made.
Yes. So not too long later, the Dr. Lesh is looking at the television. They change the channel to an empty channel where it's just white noise all the time. And Diane says this will sound weird, but she comes in better here. And then you hear Carol Ann's voice saying, Mommy, there's somebody here. Mommy, is that you? And eventually, like old jewelry that's 100 years old, like falls from the ceiling.
Of course.
So they see that the roof in the living room is the way out, but they're not sure where the way in is. And I'm thinking, maybe it's in the bedroom where the Incredible Hulk was riding a horse. Where could it be? So confused. Carol Ann's missing. Carol Ann's room is a freaking circus of toys come to life, but I'm not sure where this portal might be.
Oh, it's in her closet. No, really? That was your first guess?
So
I also want to give props to the first people you call actually help and don't just ignore you and think you're making a lie.
Yes, they seemed very interested in this. We're like, who else have you told? And they're like, no one. And they're like, sweet, cha-ching, cha-ching. So
Absolutely.
Not long later, another one of the professors or doctors, Marty, fun fact, he actually was a teacher in real life during, he left that job to go back into acting. I believe the actor left acting, went to become a teacher, somehow heard about this role, got back into it. So real life teacher playing real life or playing fictional professor. So Marty is eating a drumstick. And in a minute, we're going to talk about the rating of this movie. So Marty's eating a drumstick, and then all of a sudden maggots appear. And he's like, oh, my God. He runs to the bathroom, splashes water on his face, and with crazy Argento-type lighting, his face starts falling apart. He literally tears his face apart in the mirror. This is a PG movie. So let's talk about that. This is 1982. PG-13 did not exist until I want to say 84. So in 82, it was either PG or R. This movie, Poltergeist, was originally given an R rating by the Motion Picture Association of America, the MPAA. Now, how did it get switched to PG? Normally, that would mean that you cut a couple scenes out or some curse words out or something. But not if you're Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper. They just call up their homies at the MPAA and say, come on. Really? Can't you just make it PG? And they're like, what? Okay. So, leaving all the scenes in, which originally garnered an R rating, now all of a sudden is PG. So there's your PG. What's that?
Except for Pizza Hut. Maybe that's the reason it got back to PG. They cut the Pizza Hut.
Yes, exactly.
That's really extreme. Pizza Hut.
Marty tears his face apart, but then it turns out that he was just having a delusion, and then he's okay. Besides, he's scared at this point. So, PG-13, probably in this day and era, maybe even R. Back then, certainly R. But if you go look at early movies in the 80s and even mid-80s, you'll notice that PG movies get away with a lot back then, and that's because there was just no in-between. And back then, PG really meant parental guidance. It wasn't necessarily just a green flag saying, nothing too bad here, folks, So the meaning of that's kind of changed through the years.
Yeah.
So even with all... Go on.
I also want to point out that scene is the only scene, like in a lot of movies that I've seen, that actually disturbed me because maggots are gross. Not the face dripping scene, not bleeding everywhere, just the magnets in the Fuji. Ugh.
Oh yeah, no, the maggots are.
That's the one thing where I had to pause and just look away for just a second. It's just like I don't want that feeling in my mouth. Because if you don't know, I have a fear of leeches. So those little squirmy things I do not do well with, especially when they have a habit of eating you. I do not like. And so that personally made me feel uncomfortable.
So what you're saying is we need to review Stand By Me next.
I have a feeling the way you said that, we should not.
No. Well, one is not horror, but there is a great leech scene, and in real life, they actually got leeches on them. Good stuff. So let's go back to that scene, though, where he picks his face apart. This goes back to some cool practical effects. 1982. I mean, you could totally tell that, like, he's looking in the mirror and he's kind of altered. Then all of a sudden it flashes to it and it's clearly a prosthetic, right? But it still looks really rad. What'd you think of that scene, the face pick apart scene?
Obviously didn't disturb me as much as the maggots, but I thought, I was like, from seeing where we were, like in the movie, like the biggest thing that was like creepy, slow and behold, was either the tree scene or just the, like you said before, the viney wisp stuff coming out of TV. And then it's just like, oh yeah, your face is melting.
Yes.
So it was definitely just a big jump in just like what you were expecting.
Yes.
That's why it caught me a little off guard. But
it's quickly.
It's not like it's terribly scary, but it's just like that's what takes you off guard.
Yeah, and it's creepy, and I think it's creepier that it was this man having the vision that this was happening to him, right? Because it's like, they've gotten inside his head, or it has, whatever it is. So, a couple scenes later, we have some supernatural. So they have, all of these doctors have now recording equipment and video cameras set up in what looks to be the living room. At the top of the stairs, what we see first is like this angel-like being, or this woman in white glowing light supernatural figure that's almost angelic. Again, even though we've now seen that there are some nefarious powers here, we're not sure what this is. So they're all awestruck by this, and then the light leaves and they're like, hey, let's look at that footage. And what they see in that footage is a ton of supernatural beings kind of walking around. What do you think of all this?
I was like, that really, that was kind of like misleading for me, because when you think of poltergeist, it's not poltergeists. It's not plural. So I went into this movie thinking there was just one, being going around. And after seeing this bunch, I was just like, this is going to be a little bit of a rodeo, because there's definitely going to be multiple spots. I also want to go back. Sorry that I missed this beforehand. I wanted to go back to the melting face scene.
Yes.
He's like the only guy that gets his own vision distorted. Nobody else really has like these visions of themselves or hallucinations. It's only him, which is very strange to me. It's just like, I wonder why they only made it to him, because like if this is one of the powers of these poltergeists, you figure they do it to more, draw people away, or scare people, or even perhaps kill them and stuff like that.
Right. Why stop there?
Why stop at Marty?
Right. As far as the delusions.
Exactly. Because
clearly they don't stop.
No.
The real attacks, But yes, they got into his head. That's an interesting thing. Maybe he was going along with the folklore of ghost movies. Maybe he was a spiritually weaker one, so it was easier to break into his psyche.
It's too many theories. I think you can just put reason on and just move on. But
I think we should dissect this. No, but that is an interesting point, and but it just goes to show you that they can kind of attack you in different ways, both as we know with the tree directly and physically, and then Carol Ann being sucked into whatever dimension.
Yeah, it feels like all the attacks were singular, or they're isolated by themselves.
Right. Yep. Exactly. But the visions is in front of anyone. At one point when they're having tea around that table, the tea pot or kettle just slides across the table. Like it's just constant inanimate objects moving. They're definitely not shy. But you're right, when it comes to almost like hauntings, it like starts attacks. Off isolated. Right. Yeah. Attacks, violent attacks. It starts off isolated.
Exactly.
Clearly many characters were involved in the tree scene, but started off with the tree and the boy.
Exactly.
Just like the closet and the girl. So, after the supernatural beings and all that, we see a ton of these things. And okay, to go back to Diane, and I do like Diane as a character in this movie because I like that she's not necessarily afraid of these, but come on, she still looks excited. Your daughter's in the side of television. You're seeing this glowing thing at the top of your stairs. Now, maybe that's just her way of saying, I don't know how to believe what I'm looking at, but I just got more of like this weird, innocent excitement. And I think that ship sailed a while ago. Didn't take me out of the movie, but it's just like, how much do you love your children? But obviously a lot, and we find out later. So let's flash forward just a little bit more. And we find out what really is all to do about this. We find out that they are, in fact, their home, this new community that they're building all these phases on. I think they're living on phase 3, was a former burial site. It was a former cemetery that was supposedly moved out, and now it's Cuesta Verde community. So we're now shortly introduced to the legendary character portrayed by the late, great Zelda Rubenstein named Tangina. And I personally think they should have just kept her name Zelda, but that's just a video game. Cool name. Yes.
As a video game fan, I find that pretty cool.
So exactly. So and it predates Zelda. How cool is that?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting to think about. Is that it came before that? Makes you think like, was Zelda Rubenstein the inspiration of Zelda?
They just pictured her running around in a green outfit.
Well, that's not Zelda, that's Link. But you know what? We'll
close enough. Close. It's been a while.
Definitely offended with that comment, but
I beat Zelda. I just did it in 1988 and forgot a lot. It's a true story. I remember finding the secret portal in the bush. Thank you. So Tangina enter Carol Ann's room, and at this point it's like a pitch black room with a strobe light, and it's very creepy. It's actually, to me, that dark room and not seeing much besides light coming from the closet was creepier than all the toys floating around.
Oh, for sure.
So she throws a baseball into the closet, and it comes out of the ceiling into the living room. So that was her test. They write a 1 and 2 on it. She throws both, and she's like, yep, this is the corridor. And she says, Carol Ann is at the mouth of the corridor. And you can hear Carol Ann's voice, and you hear Tangina say, don't go into the light, Carol Ann. Don't go into the light. So, long story short here, they throw the rope into the closet, and they keep one end in the room, and Tangina is going to go in to rescue Carol Ann, but here we go. Now she gets the Mother of the Year award. And Diane says, let me go. Tangina says, you've never done this before. Diane says, neither have you. And Tangina goes, yeah, you're right. You go.
Jesus.
So, what's that?
I wanted to quickly, before we went over it, of course it was a burial ground. Why would it never not be a burial ground? It feels like
this is what started that trope.
Okay.
Yes.
Because to me, like, that's, you don't see a lot of horror movies, but you know a couple cliches. And that's like one of the biggest cliches. Of course it was a burial ground. You're going to have poltergeist issues. People died there. And of course they built it. It's the one house too. The only house.
See, with Poltergeist, that trope doesn't count because they started it.
Which is,
so, at this point, when you see it, you got to put everything in context. So at this point, when you see it, that's not a trope of like, oh, I mean, maybe it had been done before, but this is before just, this is what popularized that whole thing.
Wow. That's crazy to think about because, like, that's like one of the biggest cliches that you think of in horror movies.
Sure. Oh, a lot of these classics we'll be revisiting. We'll be like, oh, of course it's this. I'll be like, this is the one that started it.
That's
So
it's cool to cool to think about. Like,
yeah.
I just saw a movie that kind of reinvented horror.
Yes. Oh, for sure. And this is kind of in a weird category that I call family horror, depending on the age of children.
I
Because,
agree.
No one dies,
No.
really. I mean, currently there are dead people already, but no character dies. And there's overall a happy ending, which we'll get to. So
Yeah.
Diane straps a rope to her. She leaps into the portal. And here's another thing that you see in other ghost movies, including Ghostbusters. When she drops down through the other side, through the ceiling, into the living room, she's covered in pink ectoplasm.
Of course.
Later is often...
That's just a given at this point.
There you go. Right. So ectoplasm wasn't, that was in movies before, but again, not this mainstream blockbuster type thing.
But it was almost like I barely even made a note about that because it's so commonplace,
Yes.
But again, you're going back. It's insane to just think about how many things this kind of popularized because.
Absolutely.
Well, you have to give credit to the names of the people that were involved. Like Spielberg, Hooper, those are two of the biggest directors, Especially.
Yeah, well, Hooper at the time in horror, even though his big smash hit was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but that movie changed horror.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie changed ghost movies. So there you go. And Spielberg, often with what he touched, would change the genre.
Yeah.
Or take it to the next level, at least, and present it in a different way. Dust off old things, make a new, and make it almost fully original, sometimes fully original, and just was definitely a trendsetter.
It's amazing. It's amazing to think about.
So, and at the same time that Diane's rescuing Carol Ann and dropping through the ceiling, a giant skeleton, rotten-like face that's described as the Beast comes through the closet, and that's probably one of the, to me at the time, I remember that being a very effective jump scare scene. What do you think of that face popping out?
I figured, I played horror games and stuff like that, and the easiest way to get someone scared is to surprise them. Startle them. So I figured I knew one was coming. I didn't get as scared as I thought I was going to be because I was getting into the movie because it's really easy movie to just kind of feel connected and stuff like that. But honestly, not too scary to me. I think it's not the movie's fault. I think it's the time's fault because this was 30 years ago.
Sure.
So the effects just didn't have the same.
Yeah, I thought it looked good, but you're right. I mean, no matter what they do, this film's going to be dated, so it's always going to be that looks good for 1982.
Mm-hmm.
Besides, the tree I think looks good to today's standards. Same with the house.
Oh, the tree looks amazing.
Which we'll get to. Yeah, the tree was pretty cool. The live action tree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so everything is seemingly okay. They're going to be moving out. They've rescued Carol Ann, and okay, so. While they're doing this, I should rewind a bit. And they're rescuing Carol Ann. Something weird. You always heard them say, "Stay away from the light" through the movie. Tangina starts saying, "Reach for the light. Cross over, children. All are welcomed." So she's inviting all of the lost souls to cross over to the light.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so at the end of the film, Steve is at work because, no big thing here. They're just going to leave my family in the house we're moving out of because it almost ate us. So Steve's at work. Dana's on a date. By the way, Dana, I appreciate her character because through a lot of these scenes where Diane looked fascinated or they just looked happy as parents to hear Carol Ann's voice, Dana looked terrified through this movie. She didn't like any of this at any point. And I feel like at least one character in real life would be that way. Right, because this is not normal stuff.
And she's old enough where they could send her away, too, which I appreciated. Because there was just same thing with the Robins. They're all right, if we're getting Carol Ann, let's get the other people who are vulnerable, let's get them out.
Right, exactly.
I love that because I love seeing logical things in these kind of movies.
And in an illogical world they're in.
Because
someone's got to keep their head together.
Most of the mistakes in horror movies is caused of illogical reasoning, and I'm just glad to see that they have logical reasoning. And it's kind of relieving to see that back.
Oh, absolutely.
You look at it and you're just like, that felt nice.
Yeah. Well, look, someone's sane.
Yeah.
So this leaves Carol Ann in the house, Robbie, and Diane.
Mm-hmm.
Carol Ann is in her bed playing with shorty robe Luke Skywalker and a creepy headless doll. Diane is taking a bath, and Robbie is checking under his bed. Classic.
Mm-hmm.
So while Robbie's checking under his bed, the evil, creepy clown doll pops up and pulls him under the bed. I still found this scene very effective.
Oh yeah, it's like two things: leeches, clowns.
Quick, someone out there
more.
suggest a movie that is crossover leeches with clowns so we can review it next.
I don't understand that there was ever a time in history where clowns you were looked at as like, oh, that's funny. No, they look creepy and scary and stay away from me.
Yes,
Like,
exactly. If you're not Fizbo, I'm not interested in you.
If you're not a clown, I'm not interested.
So at the same time Robbie's being pulled under his bed, Diane, this is cool, and I thought this looked really cool. Diane at this point has enjoyed her bath and she's relaxing on her bed until she's pulled up onto the wall behind her, all the way to the ceiling, all the way across the ceiling down the other side of the wall. And I'm pretty sure this is what inspired the famous scene in A Nightmare on Elm Street. What do you think of this effect of Diane being spirit handled across the wall and ceiling? I thought that looked pretty cool.
I paused it because just the fact that like it has a better effect than the CGI effects, because it's live. You don't see any created effects.
Right.
Obviously, I think the easy explanation to how this was made was good camera work and basically making a bunch of different sets of the tilting of the room.
Exactly.
But it was done beautifully.
Yep, the Steven Spielberg and practical effects are just, I mean, his practical effects are top notch. Not to get derailed, but for instance, if you watch Jurassic Park, only about 8 minutes of that movie is CGI. When you see the full body of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, that is a full life-size replica of a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
You
that
can
is
just tell
automated. Yeah, exactly. And because he is. And because he is Steven Spielberg, he gets the big budget movies and he can afford all this, but he knows what to do with that money. Unlike many big budget movies to this day that just, it's like, really? That costs that much? So
ahead of his time.
No, way. Always will.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
The Beast, meanwhile, Carol Ann's going to be sucked back into the closet seemingly. And the Beast is blocking Carol Ann's room. Well, stuff grows out of the door frame. At this point, the closet looks like it's fully alive with tonsils and vines and tentacles. It's pretty creepy. The Beast, I think, looks pretty good here, blocking the room.
I agree.
Yeah, it's really good. And
it's CGI. It's just this day, like you expect so little out of this time, and they've done so much. And it's just crazy.
Diane can't go up the stairs because she gets electrocuted every time she tries to touch it. So she runs frantically outside. And here comes arguably the most famous scene of the movie. And we'll go into why. She falls into the empty pool and she's surrounded by all the skeletons. And that's the reveal. Up to this point, storyline wise, we were to believe that this place used to be a cemetery. Now we learn that they took a shortcut. Exactly. You took away the tombstones, but you left the bodies. And here's a fun fact about this scene. All of those skeletons were 100% real human skeletons.
Holy, whoa.
And here's another fun fact about Hollywood.
Humane.
That happens in so many movies, dating back like in the original House on Haunted Hill by Vincent Price. There's one dancing skeleton in that movie, and that was a real skeleton. Lots of other genres that have used skeletons use real. But the bottom line is it's actually cheaper for them to get a human cadaver than it is to recreate one.
That's insane. Is that like an organ donor thing where you could just put it on your ID?
Well, yeah, you donate your body to science. They don't need the bones. Hollywood will take them.
Yeah, it's like, can I donate my body to Hollywood?
And that is how I will finally be introduced to Hollywood. Just throw me in a cool movie, please, or a movie so bad it's good.
Use my dead body for comedy props.
Yes, please. Or something terrifying.
Oh yeah.
So she's screaming around these real life skeletons, which was probably easy for her to do. And I honestly can't remember if they were aware that they were skeletons or not. I know in other movies they weren't, and actors would get mad. I'm not sure if they were given the lowdown on this one or not. But so the closet's full alive as she's screaming with these live skeletons, and we see the tentacles and the vines, and it's like a giant mouth of the beast about to swallow up Carol Ann and little Robbie, and they rescue her. Steve's back in the house. They all get in the car except for Dana. They're like, screw her. She's on a date, so she'll die. And Dana, luckily for her, arrives at the same time. And they're like, get in the car. And then the house implodes. And I thought this scene of the house imploding into the ground looked good. And they used a scaled 6-foot model to do this.
It was actually absolutely well done. I could barely tell that it was dated. Like, that's the biggest thing you go into these movies. I said it before, I'll say it again.
Exactly.
This is 40 years of the past. You expect things to be dated. That was definitely not one of those things. Like the skeleton hands, the wisp, none of it. None of it was as good as that. And I paused on it. I thought about it. It's just like it was crazy. Like it looked real. Like that was the one part of the movie that I was like, holy shit, did this actually happen?
And what's cool about that scene is they don't do a close-up of the house imploding. The family's in front of it. The neighbors are around. So they were able to do it with a 6-foot model and leaving the correct perception, depth perception of the house to them. And it was all done, to us with all of them on screen at the same time with the house imploding. And to pull that off in 1982, pretty cool.
Oh my God.
With the 6-foot model, pretty cool.
It was amazing. Like, again, it's just like you go back, you think, wow, they did this at this time.
Yes.
And people think, you start to realize that, man, maybe the moon landing was fake if they had stuff like this.
Oh, let's not start that.
No.
You can bring the young audience believe the flat earthers at home. So So the final scene, of course, is they're safe in a hotel or motel and get a little bit of comic relief here where they see the TV and they're like, nope, and they throw it out the window. And that's it. So we get a good ending. No one dies. One of the few horror movies that I think are effective with no deaths. Usually deaths have to occur to help entice the fear. But at this point, this was at that time, a modern ghost story, with modern special effects and everything else that Spielberg and more so Hooper were able to instill fear without a lot of gore, minus 1 or 2 scenes, and without anyone dying. So there you go, folks. Poltergeist. What are your ultimate thoughts on this, Christian?
I do want to review some of the characters and how the actors and actresses play them. My favorite character, I think it's easy to say, is Tangina. I think her southern accent mixed with her knowledgeable role of just knowing everything that comes with this always has an answer. The Carol Ann, like I get to hear a lot of that in Texas. Yeah, I hear a lot of that in Texas, and it's just for some reason she sells it so well. I don't think a single person on the cast was like they didn't put their heart into it, or that was nearly not good acting or anything like that. Because I didn't think of them as cast members the entire time. I thought of them as characters and just characters. I didn't think, oh man, Craig T. Nelson is sucking at Steve. Not as like
so that was by design. Spielberg wanted the cast to be relative unknowns because, for instance, if they got someone famous in 1982 like Jack Nicholson, it would be Jack Nicholson in this movie. Like exactly. It kind of felt like with The Shining. Good movie, but still you're watching Jack Nicholson in The Shining. Had they gotten, I don't know, Marlon Brando, it'd be like, oh, Marlon Brando is being haunted here. But they get these people that are, a lot of them are known now, like Craig T. Nelson would go on to be in this famous sitcom for, I don't know, 7 to 9 years called Coach. Many of these actors would go on to other movies, but at the time, very few people saw this cast and was like, oh, them. Like they might look slightly familiar, but they were not big A-list actors at this point.
Yeah, I have a feeling that knowing the Spielberg movies I have seen, his major roles have never really had those big names.
Yeah, until later, but you're right. I mean, even if you go, like, Sam Neill was definitely a famous actor, and so was Jeff Goldblum. But if you look at the leads of, like, Jurassic Park,
Ready Player
they
One.
were recognizable actors, but they weren't like topping blockbusting charts at this time.
It was easy. They did it was easy for you to identify them with the character.
Exactly. And let's talk a little bit. I'd only want to do this a little bit because it's a bunch of BS and tomfoolery. And of course, it helps with the scare, I guess, the legend of the movie. But there is, we're going to go into a little bit of tragedy here. There is a supposed curse of the Poltergeist movies. And some people say it's because they used real skeletons. So that's fine if you believe that kind of thing can happen. I don't personally, but not judging them, that's fine. But let's talk about some of the tragedies that happened. So let's start with, of course, as many fans and just people around from that era will remember, sadly, Heather O'Rourke died very young.
It's so tragic.
I want to say she died like 6 years after this movie. She died in 1988. So yeah, this movie was made in 81. So about 7 years after this, of cardiac arrest, but it's not as strange as it sounds. See, so a lot of these conspiracy theorists will say stuff like that, like, pardon my typing. So like a lot of these conspiracy theorists will be like, oh, well, young girls don't die of heart attacks. Correct. But, you know, they do if you have medical conditions, which she did. And let's just talk about her illness and death to put rest the idea that this young girl was taken early because of filmmakers deciding to use real skeletons in movies like lots of filmmakers did before them. Yeah. So in 1987, she became ill with giardiasis. I don't know how to pronounce that. But it is a parasitic, you hate parasites, it's a parasitic disease. And it's about 10% of those infected have no symptoms.
It's not helping with the leeches stuff, I'll tell you that.
Well, this happened because she contracted them from well water, her family's home in Big Bear Lake. She was then subsequently diagnosed as having Crohn's disease. She had cortisone injections and other things going on, and she suffered cardiac arrest. They revived her. She's in the Children's Hospital in San Diego, and it was there that they realized she also had intestinal stenosis. So she went into for emergency surgery. She survived the emergency surgery, but initially, but afterwards suffered another cardiac arrest while in recovery. They tried to revive her for 30 minutes, but she was pronounced dead that afternoon.
That's so terrible.
That was on January 31st, 1988. So curse or just medical issues and, you know, diseases and stuff. So probably the latter, since I'm going to believe science on that one. All right, next sad one. As far as this movie, some other stuff happened in Poltergeist 2. If we ever cover Poltergeist 2 or 3, we can talk about it then. But as far as this movie, the next big tragedy, and this is sad, is Dominique Dunne. So she was like, pardon me, Dominique Dunne is the one that portrayed Dana, the 16-year-old girl or daughter. Yep. In real life, she was like 20 or 21 portraying that. She died the year this movie was released by being strangled to death by her boyfriend in her driveway.
Holy crap.
That boyfriend would be sentenced to 6 years in prison and only served 3 years. Yep, 3.5 years later, he's
Where
out.
Is he now?
He's changed his, actually went down the rabbit hole a little bit on this. So her father kept harassing, like he became a chef straight out of prison. And this restaurant hired him. So then a bunch of protesters organized by Dunne's surviving father primarily organized a demonstration outside that restaurant where everyone who entered the restaurant was handed a flyer that said the person preparing your meal tonight just got out of prison for strangling my daughter. Or something to that effect, and that affected the restaurant. He quit, he moved away, he got remarried, he changed his last name, and the father stopped stalking him after that because he said, this is not how my daughter would want me to spend the rest of my life. So, very sad. Again, curse or dating a crazy person that strangles her to death. I mean,
maybe
so
it's just
according to
bad
these
taste in men.
conspiracy theorists, that person would have never murdered someone else if they didn't use real skeletons in Poltergeist. And poor Heather O'Rourke never would have had her ailments if they just used plastic skeletons.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to call BS on that one.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's great to sensationalize it, and it makes them, you know. So I remember being a kid. So again, this is before the internet. And I remember I wasn't allowed to see this movie as a kid, so I had to do what every other good American child had to do, which was sneak and watch it, right?
Absolutely.
But I remember my brother telling these stories because he was 6 years older than me, and talking about the little girl died and this other girl died and all this other stuff. And, you know, it was never accurate stories. And I would hear this at school and the legend becomes bigger. Like at one point, I remember one of my friends thought that the young girl died on set while filming this. And it was like, as soon as it was released in the theater, you know, Dominique Dunn died. And it's like, it wasn't quite like that. Although, unfortunately, Dunn did get murdered while this was released. So that is just tragic. She died at the young age of 22. So those are the big sad things that happened during this movie, or around this movie, not during. But obviously, O'Rourke lived years after that, not as long as she should have. But, you know, the legends at the time were much greater than this. So it's like, oh, is this movie cursed? No, people get diseases and people date shitty people. So, you know, just sounds like the bad luck of the draw in one instance and a bad judgment call on character in the other.
Yeah. I do want to go back because I apologize. I forgot about this earlier.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff like the humor in this wouldn't be able to be used today, especially in today's time.
Well,
Like,
you think that the cancel culture would be on top of it?
yeah, I don't think catcalling a high school girl when you're a construction worker who looks older than the oldest person there, as in his father.
Well,
or
that
her
might
father.
remain in if that character was supposed to be very creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, I don't think people would like it, not one bit.
No.
I feel like another thing that I put down in my notes, I found this hilarious, is when they were doing their the mom and the dad, Diane and Steve, were doing their dirty talk before Carol Ann got freaked out.
Yes.
They were making duck noises, and it was
Yes.
working. I don't know what kind of thing you have to be into for duck noises to be working, but whatever they have is strong, and I respect them for it.
I think that was also a good directing call to try it. I'm sure they did not want, obviously they didn't want this movie rated R, so they had to make it in a way where the parents would pick up on it, but the kids wouldn't.
The duck noises, yes.
Yes.
And another thing was Steve's constant turning to marijuana. Now I think it's more acceptable. Maybe like 10 years before today, maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, weed is way more acceptable now than it ever has been, and since it became at least illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's just a lot. There's so much, and also the TV controllers switching the TVs of other houses. Was that actually a thing, or was that just the movie?
Say it again.
The TV controllers of the neighbor and their houses changing the channels. Was that an actual thing?
Yes.
Wow.
That could happen. Absolutely. It also used to happen with garage door openers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That would be annoying.
Yeah, not as much as the TV. I remember pranking one of my neighbors because we both had a Zenith cable box top. And if I went to my neighbor's window and hit the channel, it would mess with it. And you could put any number in the box, even if the number didn't exist. Because back then with cable, you know, you were paying for like maybe 18 channels. Yeah. Maybe. I mean, I'm not talking about 82. This is late 80s with the Zenith box. So, you know, you weren't having hundreds of channels, but you could put anything in the box and it wouldn't necessarily turn to that channel. But my next door neighbor was very religious. So I would hit 666. So that would pop up on her box, and then I would hide, and it'd freak her out. Then I would put 666 again, and of course, I never fessed up. It was me.
Seeing what you're doing now with horror movies, I'm not surprised.
I was like, I don't know. Like, I was a good kid. I think I was like, if it was 88, I would have been like 10.
So had the camera.
I was a good kid. That would have been the extent of like the tomfoolery I got into. Oh, and I do apologize. To rewind, there was one other character who was actually murdered from the first movie, and the actor's name was Lou Perryman, who played Pugsley. Yes, he was killed with an axe by a 26-year-old man named Seth Christopher Tatum in Austin, Texas in 2009. So again, this curse really stretches if we're waiting to curse someone. And that's tragic and that's horrible. I don't know the story beyond that. He was 67 years old at the time of his death, according to IMDb. And that's tragic. But you can't really call that a curse when the movie's 1982 and the man gets married. Same thing, murdered in 2009.
Still murder, which is just crazy to think about, but like it's such a stretch.
And dealing with tragedy, I want to say one thing I didn't speak about before with Heather O'Rourke. So Drew Barrymore was denied the role, and he was looking for someone innocent. Spielberg actually was eating lunch with her mother and sister at like this MGM catering type place, and Spielberg thought she looked perfectly innocent and perfect for this role, and he wanted someone that embodied innocence, and she certainly did. And when she auditioned, he wasn't a big fan of the audition because she couldn't stop laughing through the lines that were supposed to be serious, but he knew there was something special about her, and he went with his gut instinct, and of course it worked out.
Yeah, she like I said, she stole the movie.
Oh, yeah. And he auditioned her again and basically said, I need you to scream. And then she screamed. And then he's like, I need you to look afraid. And she looked afraid. He's like, yeah, okay, you'll be good. Yes. And if anyone wants to see the clown puppet, just visit Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas.
I will not be going. Not like clowns.
Yes, and so yeah, that's and earlier I said Spielberg wanted unknown actors. It was also Hooper. They both, they did collab on this, and
absolutely,
well, both agreed. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what else you got? Any other thoughts on this?
I think that about wraps it up. I do think I wanted to make sure because my notes were a little bit vague, but that long hallway zoom, I think we talked about it. I love that scene so much. That made me pause the movie and just freak out about that. That long hallway zoom was beautiful. It portrayed the mysteriousness and creepiness of the movie.
You will notice similar shots in other horror movies as we take this adventure together.
Oh, I imagine.
Just remember that scene from Poltergeist.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of my favorite scenes. I think the biggest ones to gloss over is the scene of course, the house collapsing. The scene of, you could really tell how good Craig T. Nelson played Steve when he showed his emotion about, like, you built it on what? You didn't get rid of the bodies, blah, 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 blah. I honestly, one of my favorite characters because, of course, he was the good father across from Diane, who was not a good mother. But she was a good mother, not a good mother.
She made up for everything when she's like, I've got the rope, let me go get her.
Yeah, but she's also traumatized her child. So...
Yeah, you're staying this
so I don't think it's she turned it into a win. No, I think she still suffered a loss from that.
Yeah. I mean, talk about the PTSD in all of these characters.
Oh boy,
for years.
They can't watch a TV ever again.
I think I would live in a hotel the rest of my life.
I think I would never watch TV. I think they can live in another house because they know it was on a burial ground. I feel like they knew that was the cause. They could get past living in a house. I don't see them trusting a TV. Especially one that starts with white noise. They hear the national anthem, they're breaking it with a hammer. Easy.
Yes.
They're keeping a baseball bat by their chair, and as soon as the national anthem plays, they are breaking that TV. Guarantee you.
Yeah, yes. And so what's funny about this is Spielberg at the time was not directly creatively involved with Star Wars, but you do see a ton of Star Wars product placement.
Oh, absolutely.
In this, you see R2-D2, you do see obviously Shorty Robe Luke Skywalker,
Hulk.
Darth Vader. You say Hulk? Yeah, my favorite Star Wars character.
You played Chewbacca.
Yes. So that's just kind of interesting, but lots of product placement there. And I'm willing to bet it's probably the same studio or something.
Or
But
maybe
yeah,
a
just
sponsorship deal.
yeah, because it's cool because retro is in now, and this movie is was
retro.
modern back then, but now just a retro fest for us
Yeah,
fans.
it's a retro as it gets.
Exactly.
You
And
look back
I
at this, and
one more fear fact for fans of the sequel, which I'm a fan of the sequel, not a huge fan of the third one at all. Thought that was some weak sauce, but the sequel introduces a very creepy character that's basically a ripoff of the Tall Man and Phantasm, called the Reverend Kane. In the original script of the first Poltergeist, Kane was in that scene where they're looking at the video. There was supposed to be at some point another beast-like apparition in that scene. They decided not to go with that, but they were going to see the reflection of Reverend Kane for the first time, and he's introduced in the second one, but he originally was in this first script. So that's just a little fun fact for the diehard Poltergeist.
Deleted foreshadowing.
Yes. And just a fun fact about Zelda Rubenstein. She filmed her role of this. I believe this whole thing took like 24 weeks or so. She filmed all of her parts in 6 days and was out of there. She has said in numerous interviews that she didn't like Toby Hooper because she could see he had a drug problem.
Oh. Womp, womp,
Good luck in Hollywood in the 80s then.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Hey, but she did her job, though. I'll tell you that much.
Yes.
She did her job.
Yes,
really
she did.
well.
Oh, yeah, no, she's a legend in the horror community, a legend in pop culture because of this. And just, yeah.
She made a video game, too.
Did she make a video game?
Yes, she's named Zelda.
Oh, right. Duh. Sorry. Maybe there's a video game I forgot about back in the 80s. So,
It's the main character.
and I guess if we just want to touch one more minute on or second on the stupid Poltergeist curse thing, Julian Beck played Kane in Poltergeist 2, and he would end up dying in 1985, and everyone's like, the curse, the curse. Well, he had a long battle with stomach cancer and finally succumbed to it. So, yeah, not really, and some other people died in Poltergeist too. And Heather O'Rourke was still, she was in all three movies. She died in 88 after.
Ooh, I'll have to watch the other ones.
Yeah. No, we'll eventually, I think, get to them. And they're kind of in order, like a lot of trilogies are, of quality. Like the first one's the best, the second one's okay, the third one shits its pants.
I feel like that's a lot of movies, is that you put your effort, you try to get a cash grab, and then you really try to get a cash grab.
Yeah. And then you make The Hobbit into 3 movies that are boring and, like, hey, ignore.
Don't diss my boy JR.
Oh, no, I love the books, but the Hobbit movies compared to Lord of the Rings, come on. But this isn't a fantasy podcast, it's horror. And that was Poltergeist, 1982. So yes. Very good. So you enjoyed the movie overall then?
Absolutely. If we want to give it a rating, I give it a nice little 8.5 because I thoroughly enjoyed this. Out of 30? What? No, out of 10.
That's messed up. So even being a film critic, I've never done a star system or anything. If I were to give this a star system for its time, I'd give it 5 out of 5 stars for a ghost movie, maybe 4 out of 5. But I don't really do the ratings. I just go, hey, this is awesome. And I think it's worth the watch. Yeah, but you can certainly do the point rating. Most
2 hours.
People. Yeah, no, it goes by, it's action-packed, it has humor throughout, it has stunning visuals, some more stunning than others, given the year, but that's totally forgivable and nothing to forgive. It was ahead of its time at the time. And, 2 hours swiftly goes by. It does not overstay its welcome, and it doesn't spend too much time on character building. They did such good casting. You kind of know who's who right away.
Exactly. Like I honestly do think it's just like this could be in my top 10 movies,
awesome.
Just in general. Because I look back at I watched it again as soon as like a little bit after, because I did watch this admittedly quite a bit before we record this. Sorry to date it.
Yeah.
But I ended up rewatching it not because I wanted to keep my mind fresh, but just because I simply enjoyed it.
Yeah, I found myself doing the same thing. I had seen this movie a bunch, but and I had reviewed it before in one of the publications I used to write for, but it's been a while. So I wanted to write it and take fresh note or watch it and write it, I wish. I wanted to watch it and take fresh notes. And then what I ended up doing, because I was taking notes while watching it the first time, the very next day I rewatched it again just as a fan watching, no note taking. And it's a great movie.
It's a great movie.
Really.
I think that's a good place to end.
The next time you and I discuss a movie, it will be a modern ghost story, Oculus.
Oh, I'm excited to see that one.
Absolutely. So we thank you all for listening to the inaugural episode of Horror Movies Hub Presents. I thank you, my intern of evil, Christian Conley. I thank all of the listeners. And also, I just want to give a special shout out to Smart Wrestling Fan. If you are a fan of pro wrestling, then you should be listening to the longest weekly pro wrestling podcast ever. We're going on 17 years. Smart Wrestling Fan.
It's almost as old as I am.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, no, when I first started listening to it, you would have been very, very young. And now I am a co-host of one of their shows called Smart Wrestling Fan More.
I'm very proud.
Thank you. And I thank you. I am too. It's an honor, but I encourage anyone, if you're into pro wrestling, you should just Google up Smart Wrestling Fan. Their weekly show is free. For a very small donation of $5. You get like so much more. It's crazy. Just take a look at their library. And, I'm proud to be part of that team, and I'm proud to be part of this team here. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, listeners. Until next time, this has been Horror Movies Hub Presents.